Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where each week we give you another episode of what's happening here on our Northeast Iowa 21-acre homestead. My husband Alvin and I have been married for 25 years and we have 7 children. 5 of those children still live at home. Our oldest 2 are married and no longer live at home, so this means we also have 2 son-in-laws and 1 grandson so far. So on our 21-acre homestead, we seek to preserve the self-sufficient lifestyle of our old order Mennonite heritage for the next generation. We involve the children in every aspect of the homestead, from raising and harvesting our own meat, gardening and preserving to fill the family's larder, or preserving the dairy from the family milk cows, plus all the many other skills that develop the character and integrity and relationships of a family that seeks to bring glory and honor to their Heavenly Father. All right, guys, don't forget that you can order the Heart of the Homestead right here at this QR code, or if you can't scan the QR code, it'll be the first link in your description. I have loved hearing all your feedback about this book, and I'm just so happy to hear that it is blessing some of you. Hello friends, welcome back. Today we are making a double batch of Amish cinnamon rolls, and these cinnamon rolls are for the launch party guests. So we're having a book launch party, and by the time you watch this, I think the launch party will already have happened, but we are having guests bought tickets to come to the farm and have coffee in the garden. So I am making cinnamon rolls for them to enjoy with their coffee. Now, this recipe of cinnamon rolls is the most popular YouTube video on my channel. And so you may already have watched that one. So this will be a repeat, but it'll be different because I think that recipe was, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And so the first thing I'm going to do, okay, so the history of this recipe, it is 3 generations in my family, and I asked my mom, hey, why do we call these Amish cinnamon rolls, right? Because that is the recipe title in our family cookbook. And she said, oh, they're Amish cinnamon rolls because your grandma got this recipe from her Amish neighbors. So even way back then, 3 generations ago, there was a difference between the Amish and Mennonites. Even though most of you that see old order Mennonites, the horse and buggy Mennonites, which is what my family was, you would think you're seeing Amish. And a lot of you would call them Amish because the differences are so few, it's hard to recognize. Secret ingredient to these Amish cinnamon rolls, mashed potatoes. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some potatoes boiling to make mashed potatoes. Now before you go anywhere and say, I'm out, I can't handle mashed potatoes in my cinnamon rolls, let me tell you that this recipe has never left my family down in 3 generations. This is the best cinnamon rolls I have ever had anywhere. Better than Cinnabon, better than any cinnamon roll you'll ever find. So let's watch how these potatoes turn into cinnamon rolls. So I don't know if I told you, but we are making a double batch of cinnamon rolls. So I need 4 cups of warm water. I need 2 tablespoons of sugar. I need 4 tablespoons of active yeast. So active dry yeast is what I use. And I always store my yeast in the freezer to keep it from getting old, because when your yeast gets old and stale, it is less active. So active dry yeast is what I use. And then we're going to mix that. And then we're just going to let that set until it gets foamy. That means the yeast has dissolved and has become active. So because your yeast is freeze-dried, that's why you have to put it in and give it time to dissolve and become active, similar to what your sourdough starter would be. Okay, our yeast has gotten nice and active, so we are going to add 8 cups of flour next. One recipe would be 4 cups, but I'm making double, so it is 8. So I'm going to add 4 cups, and then I'm going to mix that in, and then I'm going to add 4 more cups. I better put my lid on. That's the first part of the journey to these cinnamon rolls. So we covered this up, and we're going to let this rise until it's double before we add in the rest of our ingredients. So my potatoes are almost soft. We're just going to give them a little more time. All right, the potatoes are soft. I'm going to see if they have any excess water. They don't. So we're going to mash these until they're no longer lumpy. I need 2 cups of mashed potatoes for a single recipe, or 4 cups for a double recipe. So we're going to let the potatoes cool so they don't kill our yeast. This is already almost double in size. And so I'm a little off with my time management this morning. My mom and my grandma used to get up, get the potatoes mashed and everything cooked and mashed before breakfast, and then while we ate breakfast and got ready for school, their potatoes would cool, and then they would start everything else. But personally, yeah, I could have probably done that, but I wanted to film it, and I don't like to film at 5 a.m. I like that time to kind of be quiet in the house and get up. So I'm going to give those potatoes a little bit of time to chill there, and then I'll put them in the refrigerator, and then we'll continue with adding the rest of our ingredients to this yeast dough. So mashed potatoes take a long time to cool, and my dough, as you can tell, my dough is ready to add some more things. So I'm going to put them in, put my mashed potatoes in a bowl like this, spread them out, and put them in the freezer. So now I'm going to begin to mix together what we call the enrichment ingredients, which is a lot of fat. So I need 2 cups of sugar. A single recipe would be 1 cup. 1 tablespoon of salt for 1 recipe. So I need 2 tablespoons of salt. And I've got my beaten eggs in there. So 1 recipe calls for 5 eggs. All right, we're going to add our 2 cups of melted butter and our mashed potatoes. Your mashed potatoes don't have to be cold. They just shouldn't. You know what? I forgot to measure those mashed potatoes. Well, that's no good. I needed a total of 4 cups. I think that was pretty close to 4 cups. So now we're going to mix these all together. All right, there's all our enrichment ingredients. Now we're going to add these enrichment ingredients to this yeast starter or the dough. You know what? That's a better idea. This measuring cup I love, but I do not love pouring from it. You have to pour just slowly in the beginning. And as you can tell, I am going to end up mixing by hand because this is going to fill this up. That's okay. I'm going to mix these enrichment ingredients in, and then we will switch to hand kneading. So I need a total of 12 more cups of flour. So I'm going to add 3 to this mixture because the more flour I can add now, the less I have to knead in by hand. All right, let's remember we've got 3 cups of flour added. Okay, that went well. I think I'm going to add 3 more. That means I've got half of the flour mixed in. Okay, that is all the flour I'm going to ask my mixer to handle. So I need 6 more cups of flour. So we're going to start with 1 in the bowl. And we're going to add all of this. Oh, that's heavy. All right, look at that beautiful dough. So I need 5 more cups of flour. So I'm going to start with 4. And I am measuring light here, meaning I'm not packing down my flour. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 4, because it's easier to add flour than it is to take flour away. So this dough is becoming rather sticky. So I'm going to add another cup of flour, and this brings me to the total amount of flour that the recipe asks for. But from this point on, we are only going to add flour based on what the dough feels like rather than counting how many cups we've added, because everybody measures a little bit differently, and with practice you can know what your dough should feel like. It should feel smooth and elastic and not very sticky. So kneading helps the gluten develop, and as the gluten develops, your dough will become less sticky. So longer kneading and less flour should be your rule, especially after you know that you've reached the amount of flour that the recipe asks for. So I will often just sprinkle a little bit of flour on my hands to keep the dough from sticking to my hands and knead longer rather than add more flour. All right, guys, we're going to call that good, and we're going to cover it up and let it rise until it is double in size. Okay, so our dough needs 2 things to rise. That is heat and humidity. So we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap to trap the humidity. And it's fairly warm in the house today, so we're not going to worry too much about the heat. But this plastic wrap is going to trap all of the humidity and create a warm and humid environment that's going to help our dough to rise. So after a couple hours, I've decided that our dough is double in size, and we are going to shape it into cinnamon rolls. This is always my favorite part, is smashing down my dough, because it gives me a good feel for how well I did with kneading it and mixing in the flour. So we've got the table all set up to make a large amount of cinnamon rolls. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my cutting board, and I'm going to roll out a small section of dough. This part takes a little bit of practice, but personally, I like to roll out my dough very thin, because the thinner your dough is, the more layers of butter and brown sugar and cinnamon you get with each bite. Now, because we want to make a large number of cinnamon rolls, I am making these pretty small, but my favorite way is to make them big and chunky. Roll the dough out thin, but make large slices, like 2-inch slices instead of 1-inch slices like I'm doing with this batch, because you really get to experience the flakiness of this very enriched dough with a big fat cinnamon roll rather than a tiny skinny one. But like I said, we want to make hundreds of cinnamon rolls. We want to make at least 100 cinnamon rolls, and are, focusing on feeding a lot of people. And then you're also going to see that I'm cutting my cinnamon rolls with a string rather than with a knife. A lot of people will use dental floss, but I'm simply using a piece of thread from my sewing machine drawer and cutting my cinnamon rolls that way, just the way my mom and my grandma taught me to. So then we're going to place our cinnamon rolls in these baking pans and let them rise until they are double in size. So these here are almost ready to bake.
Hello.
Oh no. Are your hands like mommy's hands now? Wow. Here's your scraper if you want the scraper. He's not gonna fall off backwards. The bench isn't out real far. Yeah.
Hello.
A mess. You make a mess? Wow, your hand's messy. Flour.
You want more?
What? Are you having fun?
Put it on the
Say
board.
thank
Put
you.
it on here.
Wow. Oh.
There you go.
Yeah. Wow.
Mom.
So then how long you bake your cinnamon rolls is entirely dependent upon how big you made your cinnamon rolls or how fat you made the slices. I like to err on the side of under baking, so I take mine out right before they start changing color over the top. Like maybe there's 1 or 2 in the corners that have changed color, and then I remove them from the oven. So then I'm going to mix together some cream cheese frosting. So first I whip together my cream cheese and butter, and of course I need to add some powdered sugar. And the trick to a good cream cheese frosting is to make sure you whip it well. And this is our favorite frosting for adding to the top of cinnamon rolls. And I will make sure that these recipes are linked in the description for you. So then, as you can tell, these are the less than perfect cinnamon rolls, or the ends of my rolls, that I put all together in one pan, and I'm going to frost these, and these are the ones that the children are going to enjoy when they come home from school. All right, guys, that was a busy morning. It is about 1:30, and I've made the frosting. I've frosted the ones that are for the kids or for the family. All the rest of these are going into the freezer. And here's one of the things about the cinnamon roll dough. Because it has so much fat in, almost a dozen eggs and a bunch of butter, it freezes very well, because the more fat you have in a dough, the more it will keep its consistency and its moisture when you freeze it. And the starch, all the potatoes that went into the dough, helps the texture. So it keeps the texture of the cinnamon rolls moist and soft even after freezing and thawing. So anytime you have fat and a lot of extra starch in a dough, you know that its shelf life is going to be much longer than a dough that has a lesser amount of fat and a lesser amount of starch. So my grandma would always, when she boiled potatoes, she would pour the water off, and she would save that water because she used that potato water in her, anytime she baked anything with yeast, she used that potato water, because the extra starch makes your yeast doughs soft and it gives them a longer shelf life. So I made all the cream cheese frosting, and I am going to put this in the freezer. And all of these cinnamon rolls are going to go into the freezer. The point is, the key is you got to put them into the freezer as soon after baking as you can. So as soon as they have cooled down, you want to put them into the freezer. So that will, you don't want to wait until they're 2 or 3 days old and then put them in the freezer, because you will preserve them by putting them in the freezer. Whatever state they're in when you put them in the freezer is the state they're going to be in when you get them out. So putting them into the freezer fresh means that they're going to be fresh when you get them out. And I have frozen, I usually freeze them for up to a month, but I have already forgotten some in the freezer and used them 6 months later, and the family was thrilled with them, and I thought they tasted marvelous. But when I want to, because I want all of these cinnamon rolls for guests, and they're not just for the family, I want to impress some guests with these, I didn't want to go much more than a week in the freezer. But if it were just for the family, I would probably go up to a month. I think because I really stretched this recipe and didn't make my cinnamon rolls really tall, because I know that for most people, for most women, a really tall, big cinnamon roll is too much anyway. So I went with a smaller, more petite cinnamon roll, so that each guest can, so that each cinnamon roll is more one serving. And so because these aren't filled up to the top, I'm going to use tin foil and cover these so that there's not as much airspace. Like if I would put this on, there's a whole lot more airspace. So I'm just going to use tin foil because there's less airspace that way. All right, guys, they are ready for the freezer, and I'm ready to take a little bit of a break. So then it was launch party day.
Yes. Okay, so you know what I jack it up in is that little dessert plate. And I like honey.
So then I defrosted the cinnamon rolls on my countertop for 12 hours and then popped them into a 250-degree oven for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then we frosted them and they were ready to serve. And the cinnamon rolls got rave reviews from our guests.
Where's the? I mean, I'm her mobile.
So yeah, cinnamon rolls, whoopie pies, coffee,